Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Australian Aviation Podcast. I'm Jake Nelson, not Adam Thorne, and I'm not impersonating Adam Thorne this week. Adam is away at a conference, so I am once again in the captain's seat. Look at me, I'm the captain now. But with me is my ever-reliable co-host, Chris. Welcome, Chris.
Jake, good afternoon. How you doing?
Good, Chris. The table is barren. What happened?
I ran out of time. To get the models from the locker and set them up. So for those of you that watch and listen or watch regularly, you'll know that we normally have model aircraft on display. And what normally happens is I sneak into the studio about 10 minutes before we start recording because we do have an allocated time each week that we record. And I set the models up. But today I just ran out of time, unfortunately.
Too busy winning drones at Melbourne Cup lunches.
Yeah. I did win a drone at the Melbourne Cup lunch. Go me.
Well, you heard it. That's the latest in aviation news. So thank you for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed the podcast this week. It's been a busy couple of weeks for aviation news, hasn't it?
Very busy.
Particularly with regards to Qantas. But before we get to Qantas, we do have a shout out to make. Cameron Hyde says, "Hi guys, long time listener here from back in the Philip Tarrant and Kristen Bakusis days." He says, "I think you should contact Christian for guest appearances on the podcast." We shall have to bring that up with Adam. But he says, really enjoying the podcast from Adam, Chris and Jake. Always looking forward to listening to you guys every week. Just one question. I was wondering if you guys were looking at releasing any Australian aviation merchandise in the near future, he asks.
Funny you should say that. I've been banging on the merchandise train saying we should get some T-shirts or caps or something made for our listeners for either giveaways or to sell. So that's a really good comment. We'll definitely have to make sure Adam sees that one and we'll flag it at the next team meeting that we have. And
I, of course, am wearing a very, very fashionable Australian aviation polo shirt, the latest off the catwalks of Paris and Milan. But yes, Cameron, a pilot based out of Sydney Airport, he says, thanks for doing a good job on covering Australia's aviation news each week. Thank you, Cameron. We appreciate the comment.
We do indeed. Thanks for your support.
All right, so as Adam would say, let's crack on with the news for the week. It's been a busy couple of weeks. We did have a break last week because of a UNSW podcast, but we are covering that news this week. It's been another couple of rough weeks, shall we say, for Quantus. Particularly with regards to its perception in the media. It's taken a bit of a shellacking, has Qantas, for its defence in the ACCC's cancelled flights case. Now, if you don't know this news, the ACCC has taken Qantas to the federal court. It is alleging that Qantas continued to sell flights that it had already cancelled, and this was about 8,000 tickets to flights that had already cancelled. Now, Qantas has come back with an interesting argument, basically saying that when you buy a ticket to a flight, you're not actually buying a ticket to that specific flight at that specific time. It says that the air ticket is a bundle of contractual rights to fly, and it will do its best to get consumers to be where they want to be on time. Basically, the argument is it is impossible for an airline to guarantee 100% that a flight will depart at the time that it's supposed to depart. In its statement, it says, quote, in purely legal terms, the ACCC's case ignores a fundamental reality and a key condition that applies when airlines sell a ticket. While all airlines work hard to operate flights at their scheduled times, no airline can guarantee that. That is because the nature of travel, when weather and operational issues mean delays and cancellations are inevitable and unavoidable, makes such a guarantee impossible. For this reason, our promise is to get customers on their way to their destination as close as possible to the flight time they book, either on their original or an alternative service at no additional cost. If not, we offer a full refund. This is consistent with our obligations under consumer law and as to what we did during the period the ACCC examined. It also said that most of the passengers, all impacted domestic passengers identified by the ACCC were offered same-day flights prior to or within 1 hour of the scheduled time, and 98% of international passengers were offered flights within a day of their scheduled departure date. So that's basically Qantas's argument in this ACCC case. We cannot guarantee, it is impossible for us to guarantee that you will fly at the time on the ticket, but you do have the right to fly with us. That is what you purchased, and we will get you where you're going as soon as possible. Chris, who has had every job in aviation save for driving the plane, what do you make of this argument?
Well, I say if that's Qantas's argument, give up some of your slots. Plain and simple, because let's face it, there is literally a flight to Melbourne or Brisbane from Sydney every hour scheduled. So if Qantas are turning around saying you're not purchasing a guaranteed time to leave, then why are they operating a flight every hour?
So it's a good point.
So as a customer, I look for a flight that suits, or a flight departure time that suits my needs. Why am I going to Melbourne? I'm going to Melbourne on business. I need to be at a meeting in Melbourne CBD at 10 a.m. I'm going to take a 7 a.m. departure from Sydney, factoring in some delays or whatnot. Worst case scenario, I will arrive in Melbourne by 9. That will have me in the CBD in time for my meeting at 10 a.m. That's what I'm purchasing. I'm not purchasing, get me to Melbourne sometime that day. If I wanted to purchase get me to Melbourne sometime that day, I'd book a train and take my time, or I'd hire a car and drive down myself. I wouldn't book a flight to be somewhere specific at a specific time. Some people are travelling, unfortunately, for funerals. Some people are travelling, unfortunately, to go and farewell a loved one. Some people are travelling because a loved one is in hospital and they need to be there as quick as possible. Some people are travelling for weddings, christenings, births. Like, it's a hideous argument from Qantas. And if that's their argument, simple. Give up some of your slots at Sydney or all domestic airports. Allow competition with Rex and Bonza to come in and show us what you're made of.
This does go into something that Alan Joyce said before the Senate inquiry some time back. He was talking about flight cancellations on the Sydney to Melbourne route. I believe this was before the Senate inquiry. And what he basically said was, if we're going to cancel a flight, it is better that we cancel a flight from Sydney to Melbourne, because there'll be another one along in an hour, than it is to cancel a flight to Darwin, where there won't be one until tomorrow. So these arguments, they all seem, reasonable enough on the surface, because okay, fair enough, they got you there as quickly as possible. But it is, as you said, Chris, sometimes you really need to be there at the time that you're supposed to be there. If I'm just flying down to Melbourne for a holiday, I flew down to Melbourne for a holiday with Virgin.
Yes.
I missed a thing that I wanted to be in Melbourne for at a certain time because the flight was delayed, unavoidable circumstances, crosswinds, etc. It was a shame, but it didn't, ruin my trip because I didn't particularly need to be in Melbourne at that particular time. It just would have been nice. But if I'm flying down for a wedding or a funeral or a birth or an important business meeting or any of these things, then yes, I do want to be on the flight that I booked for at the time I booked it.
Absolutely. And we had a situation here not that long ago that one of our managing directors of the business and one of our other sales reps needed to go to Melbourne, and they were booked on a 7 a.m. departure. The aircraft boarded, passengers all sat down, the doors closed, the plane pushed back, the plane went back to the gate, everyone was disembarked and the flight was cancelled. Now, obviously in this case there was a mechanical issue with the aircraft, so an unavoidable cancellation. However, one of our managing directors here and one of my colleagues in the sales team, the next available flight they were offered was 2 p.m. that afternoon, from a 7 a.m. departure to 2 p.m. So they walked away saying, forget it. It no longer suits us to go to Melbourne. We need to be in Melbourne for a 10, I think they were going down for a 10:30 meeting, and they were booked to fly back at 3 p.m. that day. So it was a day trip to Melbourne. Now, Qantas's alternative was 2 p.m. in the afternoon, that they could get them on the next available flight.
Well, it might have gotten them down to Melbourne in time for their flight back.
Yeah, exactly right. So, look.
With favourable winds.
Yeah, exactly. But look, I just think it was a poor response from Quantus when they're already reeling a really bad publicity train in the eyes of fare-paying passengers.
And speaking of really bad publicity, it all sort of came to a head at the AGM last week.
Yes, it did.
Significant blowback from shareholders. 83% of shareholders voted against the airline's executive remuneration plan. This was a massive first strike against the board. Qantas did manage to get its preferred directors elected to the board. Todd Sampson, the ad man, did survive a 34% protest vote. Richard Goyder, the chairman, did say that he apologised for a substantial loss of trust in the national carrier. He acknowledged the, quote, complete reversal of the 90+% support for the executive remuneration in the previous years. He said, please know this, we hear the message this strong vote sends, particularly in response to broader frustration with past events, and it galvanises our efforts to restore your confidence. Now, all this was somewhat undermined when one shareholder, Chris Maxworthy, asked the board a couple of questions, asked about the ethics in appealing this decision to the High Court of the 1,700 ground workers, asked about the ethics of that. The airline, of course, lost that appeal. Goyder said the board would never, ever do anything we felt was illegal. And then Maxworthy asked about reports of Alan Joyce. He reportedly sold these Quantus shares before the ACCC announced this decision to take the airline to court over the so-called ghost flights. To which Goyder responded by having Maxworthy's microphone shut off, which was met with cries of shame on you. It's not been a good few. The Qantas's annus horribilis continues, shall we say? Yeah,
look, absolutely it does. And I think, if anything, it really puts Qantas on notice that shareholders are now paying closer attention. They're using their voice and their votes. Previously, these things have always passed without the backlash or without such a negative impact. Previously shareholders haven't put in a vote because Qantas is flying along nicely, turbulent times. They're making money. They're seen in good light with the travelling public. But with everything that Qantas has been in the news for recently, it's just bad press after bad press. And I know I'm a shareholder of Qantas and I submitted a vote this time. First time ever in the history that I've been a Qantas shareholder that I actually felt strong enough to go online and submit a vote in the AGM. And look, I honestly think the best thing that could happen to Qantas right now is Goyder goes. Bye-bye. Like, you've screwed it. You're trying to get out of it. It's not working. It's just creating more and more bad press. Leave now and let someone else come in and run the show.
Well, you would know, of course, as a shareholder, that after this ACCC court action was announced, Qantas shares dropped 20%.
Yes, they did.
There has been a bit of an uptick in recent weeks. Goyder pleaded with the shareholders, please consider the global context. He said globally, airline shares have fallen between 20 and 30% over recent months as oil prices have risen to recent highs. He said that in the first half, they absorbed most of the cost, but last month they did increase fares by an average of 3.5% due to sustained high fuel prices and a weaker Aussie dollar. He said, we firmly believe in the fundamentals of this business as we outlined in our Investor Day in May. So that's another thing. Qantas did also recently hike fares.
Yes, they did indeed. Wrong time to hike the fares. Absorb the fuel. A lot of airlines around the world are absorbing the fuel hike.
And it's not like you haven't got massive profits that you posted this year to draw upon.
So again, it was another poor taste decision by Quantas, and I honestly don't know how they can get themselves out of this. It just seems that every day there is more bad press for Qantas. Something needs to change,
Do you think some of the shine might have come off Vanessa Hudson as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you think the honeymoon might be over for her?
Honeymoon is well and truly over for her. We haven't seen anything positive come out of her other than we've heard your feedback. We are working hard to change. But then, a week later, they hike fares, they challenge an ACCC ruling, they do this, they do that, which just sends the wrong message all over again. I wish Vanessa well. I genuinely do, and I hope people give her a fair shot. But while Goyder is still there calling the shots, she is just a puppet on Goyder's strings.
All right, welcome back. You're listening to the Australian Aviation Podcast with Jake Nelson, that's me, and Chris Fenton, that's him.
Me.
So we've talked a bit about Qantas. Let's talk for a bit now about a different airline, Rex. Rex is an airline we generally like around here.
We love Rex.
We love Rex. But Rex has had a bit of difficulty lately with pilot shortages and part shortages and all these things. And as a result, one of the things that Rex has done, it's cut a lot of its regional routes. One of the routes that it cut was a service from Cairns to Barmaga on Cape York. Barmaga or Bamaga? I think it's Bamaga. Cairns to Bamaga on Cape York. Rex dropped the route, accusing Quantus and Virgin, but especially Quantus, because Rex and Quantus don't like each other, said Quantus had been relentlessly pillaging its pilots, which are strong words. But fortunately for the people of Bamaga and for the people of Cairns who want to go to Bamaga, Skytrans, the regional Queensland-based carrier, is stepping up its Dash 8-100 services from Cairns to Bamaga in response to Rex pulling out of the route. Now, I did speak to Alan Milne, the CEO of Skytrans. He confirmed that this was in response to Rex pulling out. He says, quote, "We build relationships with the communities and we want to make sure that we support them as we can. So we couldn't have them not serviced at all." He's sort of signaled that, as needed, Skytrans is willing to increase its capacity into Bamaga, working with the Northern Peninsula Area Regional Council to determine how much is required. And that if Rex sort of pulls out of any more routes in the region, Skytrans is, again, willing to step in and fill the gap. So kudos to Skytrans.
Yeah, absolutely. Well done. Kudos to them on stepping in. And I guess this is what I do love about aviation is one carrier's loss, I guess, is another carrier's fortune. Or one carrier's trash is another carrier's fortune. And airlines tend to look after communities and passengers, and especially in a place like Australia where there's not a lot of regional competition and a lot of communities do rely on these services being flown. Well done, Skytrans, for stepping in.
And it's been mentioned, a few times before. I think we've spoken a couple of times on this podcast that these services to these regional towns can often be quite infrequent. Yes. And so if that service gets cancelled or if it is delayed, then there's usually there can be a really long wait for the next plane to come along.
Yep, absolutely.
But Skytrans has operated 3 flights per week to Bamaga since September 2021. As of the end of October, it will increase it to 9 per week, with an eye to further increases from April. So Skytrans really stepping up to the plate here, I think.
Well, it just clearly goes to show that there is demand there.
Exactly.
To go up to 9 flights a week, there's clearly demand there. So either A, put a larger aircraft on the route. So should they have a larger Dash 8? So the Dash 8-4, 72 passenger capacity, I think, on the Q400s versus the 100s. But maybe they don't have the aircraft spare. I don't know. But there's clearly demand there on that route for Skytrans to go in with 9 flights.
The Skytrans fleet is the Dash 8-100. They've got the Cessna Grand Caravan and they've got the Dash 8-300. So they don't have the Dash 8-4.
There you go.
But they have 2 kinds of Dash 8 as well as the Cessna Grand Caravan. And while we're on the subject of Rex and Skytrans, I did speak to Alan Milne about this whole thing with Rex saying, Qantas has been pillaging our pilots. That's why we're cutting these routes. Basically, what Alan Milne said was that this is something that regional carriers have to accept. He said that this is essentially normal. A regional carrier is, and this is a quote from him, he says, it's a feeder organization for the bigger airlines. He said, I understand Rex's concern about it, but everyone has that same concern. He says, we made sure that we put something in place to make sure we protected ourselves. If we get 3 or 4 years out of a pilot, that's great. If they then move on to Qantas or Virgin, that's great for them and for Qantas and Virgin because they're getting, airline-trained pilots. They're not coming from general aviation. So he said that there will be a percentage of pilots that are there to build their hours, to move into the majors, so into Qantas Link on the Q400s, Alliance Airlines on the Fokkers or the Embraers, or even direct entry into Qantas and Virgin. He said, quote, that's a normal career progression, and I think most airlines would understand that.
Look, most airlines, I think, do understand that. And I guess in Rex's case, we've come out of COVID. Qantas has gone crazy on recruiting second officers on their wide-body fleets to develop into first officers and hopefully eventually captains. Rex being a fairly new player in the domestic market, obviously I'm thinking and assuming they would want to keep their Saab pilots internal to promote to their 737 fleet, so have a natural internal career progression. What Australia faces, though, is we are losing pilots offshore to larger carriers like the Emirates and the Middle Eastern carriers.
And American carriers like United.
And the Americans carriers as well, which are dangling massive carrots to Aussie pilots at the moment saying, come on board, there's a sign-on bonus, there's this bonus, there's that bonus. In some cases, come on board as a direct entry captain. So I don't think the issue's just affecting Rex. Yes, I get that as a result of the pilot shortage, Rex is having to cancel services. But I guess that just means Rex has to either A, lift its recruitment game and offer a more attractive salary or package to keep pilots there. Maybe they need to offer a sign-on bonus or a retention bonus. And maybe they need to start looking at a better career progression pathway. Now, this is something that will all be new to Rex, being new to the domestic market. And given time, they probably will get there. I'm a big fan of Rex. I wish them all the best. But he's right. It's a long-standing issue of regional airlines that they are a stepping ground to the big boys. Every pilot dreams of flying the jet.
There is Skytrans. I spoke to Milne and Alan Milne, and Skytrans said that there is this career path that they have at Skytrans that would give someone a pathway to an airline command in maybe 4 years. Mm-hmm. So what they do is they've got this partnership with CQ University, and the best of the best. Here's words. The best of the graduates from CQ University will serve as first officers in the Cessna Caravan until they reach that 700 hours. Then they'll be given command of the caravans. After a reasonable amount of time, captaining the caravans, they will go to first officer in the Dash 8, and then they will go to captain in the Dash 8. So this is, you'd have to say, and Alan Milne says this is a more attractive prospect for an aspiring pilot than paying to get their flight hours up at, say, Archerfield or Bankstown or another general aviation airport with no promise of a job at the end.
Yep. The program that they offer is a fantastic program, and it does provide a great pathway to a pilot, and that's the issue that a lot of general aviation pilots face is paying the fees to get to where they need to join an airline. So if Skytrans have this pathway mapped out already, it's a great pathway, and I think and we are seeing more airlines embrace that kind of pathway to pick the cream of the crop, I should say, and train them up their own way on their own aircraft and equipment to develop the skills. But look, Qantas have the same issue, they will, and Virgin as well, they will invest money in pilots, training, getting them onboarded, trained up, progressed, and then the Middle Eastern carriers come along, the American carriers come along and dangle the carrot, and off they go. Tax-free money offshore. Why wouldn't they?
And Skytrans has said there are pilots that stay with Skytrans because they like the flying, they like Skytrans, they like the Cairns environment. Alan Milne says it's not all of them, but if they do want to move on, then great, that's their career path, and so they should. And one thing he's pointed out is if and when these pilots do move on, then Qantas and Virgin or whoever takes them is getting a great deal out of the bargain because they have an airline-trained pilot. They have someone who's flown commercially and hasn't got their hours up, just in the general aviation world. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Correct. And I guess Alan's kind of on the money there. Rex should take credit that the big boys are seeing equality in their pilots and offering them jobs. Rex have clearly trained them well.
Now, one thing we did discuss, but before the mics went on, we were having a chat about whether Rex is still a regional carrier. I mean, predominantly it still serves the regions, but it has been making these moves into the domestic jet market. What's your take, Chris? Is Rex still a regional carrier?
I don't think Rex can be dubbed a truly regional carrier anymore. Yes, its heart is still in the country. They certainly haven't forgotten where they've come from, and their larger fleet is the regional fleet. But they're at 10 737s now, and
quite a few.
Yeah, quite a few, and a fantastic route network that just seems to be growing and growing. So I think Rex is kind of becoming this, at the moment, it's this weird hybrid domestic carrier with a regional arm, or is it a regional carrier with a domestic arm? I'm not sure how to label it right now, but I think as the years progress, we will see Rex become hopefully a mainstayer in the domestic market and be very similar to Qantas. You've got Qantas and then the regional arm Quantus link. So that's what will, I think, and what I'd like to see happen with Rex as well.
And then, of course, you've got Virgin Australia and Virgin Australia regional airlines as well.
Yep, exactly.
So it's possibly seeing Rex evolve to be another Qantas, Virgin.
Yep. Exactly. And look, I've got a lot of friends that work for Rex and they absolutely love it there. So I think Rex is onto a good thing. They're hiring good people and they're harbouring a fantastic workplace environment that people want to go to work every day.
And I think we do need, a third carrier in the market. There's, been all these arguments over the years about whether Australia can sustain three carriers. So far, it seems to be working.
Look, absolutely, it's working, and it's even working with Bonza. And I don't know, you look at places like the US, and sure, the US is a bit more spread out than Australia.
And way more populous.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got Europe as well. Now, in the US, there's God knows how many domestic carriers, and in Europe...
Spirit, Frontier, Southwest, United, Delta.
Yep, absolutely. And then there's all these even smaller airlines that have kind of been not necessarily bought out, but operate code share on behalf of American Airlines.
Yeah, like American Eagle and...
Yep, exactly right. And then it's the same in Europe. So you've got your traditional carriers, British Airways, KLM, Air France, and things like that. But then you've got all these low-cost carriers that are just thriving. So there is absolutely a market here for more competition. Australia's calling for it. Australia wants it. But unfortunately, we're in that kind of duopoly at the moment that is slowly starting to break. People are starting to lose faith in Qantas and Virgin as well. So I think both airlines are on notice. If Rex keeps doing what it's doing, staying in its own lane, not getting caught up in the crap and the drama of Qantas and Virgin, they will do really well. Like 10 aircraft in such a short time in a post-COVID world is fantastic.
And Bonza as well.
Bonza as well. 4 or 5 aircraft now.
The fifth is coming next year.
Next year, yep. About to open, I think next week is the opening of Gold Coast.
I think
base.
You're right, yeah.
So, Bonza's growing and proving to be really, really popular. So there is a market there. And I think if all airlines just stay in their own lane, worry about them and them alone and what works for them, they'll do well. Australians will support them.
All right, welcome back. This is the Australian Aviation Podcast. Now, one really nice story that's come out of Sydney this week is I'm sure you're familiar with Deborah Lawrie, the pioneering female pilot who took Ansett to court in the late 1970s over their refusal to hire women. Won her case. She became, Australia's really first female commercial airline pilot. This week, she has been honoured with the naming of a new flyover bridge at Sydney Airport. So it's this 800-metre flyover, the Deborah Lori flyover, which is part of the Sydney Gateway project. And it passes over, amusingly enough, Sir Reginald Ansett Drive. So it seems that Deborah Lawrie has once again got one over on Sir Reginald Ansett.
She absolutely has, and I kind of live for this. I love it. As soon as I heard the news on Monday that this was happening and that the flyer was going over Sir Reg Ansett Drive, I just thought, yet again she's come out on top and will forever be on top of Sir Reg Ansett. Deb is a lovely lady. I've had the pleasure to meet Deb, and she's just fantastic and a massive inspiration to all young female aviators out there, or anyone in general who's followed or who knows her story. So this brought a massive smile to my face when I first saw this story break. earlier in the week.
Yeah, she said, if someone had said to me way back when I was 25, taking on Ansett in the High Court to become a commercial airline pilot, that one day there would be a flyover into Sydney Airport named after me, I would have thought they were mad. The New South Wales Roads Minister, John Graham, said, the fact that the Deborah Lawrie flyover will cast a little shade over Sir Reginald Ansett Drive is most fitting for a woman who refused to be grounded by the area she grew up in and the man who said she would never make a commercial airline pilot. So wherever Reg Ansett is now, I'm sure he's shaking his fist very vigorously.
And then some. But I think, Jake, it goes to show that Australia does have some extremely exceptional female aviators who have been groundbreaking here in Australia. So Western Sydney Airport being named Nancy Bird
Walton. Also the name of the first Qantas A380.
Correct, absolutely. And I was so fortunate to be at the naming ceremony of that first A380 and meet Nancy Bird Walton that day. And she was an amazing lady and an amazing aviator. Australian female aviators have a strong, rich history in this country, and I think it's high time they're recognised and rewarded for what they've done.
And it's good news for Sydney traffic as well, because apparently this thing is going to it's going to have capacity for over 100,000 vehicles a day. So hopefully it will relieve some of the traffic around the airport.
I'm super excited about it. I live out near Parramatta in Sydney, so Western Sydney. And prior to the new M8 tunnel opening, for me to get to the airport, it was roughly an hour's drive, either deciding to come through the Harbour Tunnel via the north or Parramatta Road and the long way round. So now that the new M8 tunnel has opened, for me to go from my house to the airport is approximately 35 minutes. Yes, there's a toll, but hey, I'm prepared to pay for that privilege. The longest part of the journey, though, is coming off the M8 through O'Riordan Street at Mascot just to get into the airport. So this flyover opening will, save me an extra 5 or 10 minutes. And if you're on an early morning flight or if you're coming off a flight and just want to get home late at night, it's going to be a time saver. So kudos to Sydney Airport for finally making this happen. It seems that flyover has been under construction for so many years. So I'm excited that it's opening next week, and I look forward to my next trip out of Sydney Airport.
Hopefully we won't see any induced demand on that because
correct.
That does tend to be a problem with widening roads and things like that.
Yes,
just one more lane, bro. I swear it'll all work this time.
Yeah, good old Sydney traffic.
Good old anywhere traffic.
Yeah, true.
At least we're not like, where is it, like Houston or LA or places like that where they have, 10-lane highways that are choked with cars and they're planning on widening them even further because that's worked so well in the past.
Yeah, true.
All right, going to take my urbanist and transit enthusiast hat off. And that is about all the time we have. I will say thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Jake. It's been fun.
And thank you to all of you for listening. And thank you to anyone who sends in feedback. We love to hear your feedback here. And we find it so refreshing to hear all the positive feedback. And we find it helpful to hear negative feedback, though don't be too negative because we will cry.
Yes, we will.
It will be horrible. But on that note, that is it from us at the Australian Aviation Podcast. We'll see you same time next week. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.